Hello and welcome to Pictorial Planet. My name's John Finch. Don't we all want to get the ultimate quality from our films? Well, today I'm going to show you how I get the ultimate quality from Ilford PAN F. It's one of those Marmite films that people either love or dislike. I think it's a really good film, and maybe it's the way they process the film that gives them problems. I want to show you today how I process that film to get the very best quality I can from it, and perhaps show you why you should have that film in your camera right now. Now, I use this film in 120 and bulk loaded 35mm, and even in the middle of winter in Scotland when light levels are low, I still love to use this film. I think it has a unique look to it, a certain quality, a sharpness, a fineness of grain, a contrast that's really quite beautiful. And you know, in low light, you actually want to enhance your contrast. So this might be the very film you should be using in winter, wherever you are. Now, let's face it, these are characteristics that put people off this film. It's slow speed, 50 ISO, and its contrast, which can run away and get out of control. I'm going to show you how to maintain your 50 ISO with this film and even increase the ISO of this film so that you can still keep using it even if you are a handheld photographer. I recommend you use a tripod with any film because it's just going to make your photographs sharper. But if you're a handholder, I can show you how to use this film at a faster speed than 50 ISO. The contrast is beautiful. In low light, in this kind of time of the year, the contrast is poor anyway, so I like a good contrasty film. But I'll also show you today how to keep your contrast under control. And that way, we can have this film in our camera all the time and take beautiful photographs. Now, there's other advantages in this film. It's a classic technology film, so I can use classic developers. I don't need anything fancy like these tabular grain films need. You know from my channel that I prefer classic films anyway. They're just kinder on my chemistry. Now, medium format gives me the same quality as 4x5, and 35mm will give you the same quality as medium format. So this is why this film might be something you should be using in your camera. There's very little grain to speak of in these photographs. You really can't see any at all. The quality is outstanding. So we've got to think about how we can enhance the qualities of this film. Now, one of the things it's good at is sharpness. So I'm going to look at a developer that enhances sharpness. One of the problems with this film is the runaway contrast. But that is only a problem if it's misdeveloped. I'm going to show you how to keep that contrast under control. With these tips, I think you'll want to use this film in your camera. In fact, you should be running out right now to buy a roll. So here's the photograph I want to use to demonstrate today how we can control PAN F's contrast and how we can show how sharp PAN F really is. Here's the white fence. I'm going to photograph this area of the white fence here. Now the sun is bouncing off this white fence, so there's a tremendous amount of light coming off this fence. But on the left-hand side, we also have this shadow area, so I can see the full range between the shadows and these highlights. Now, here on the fence is something very interesting. We've got a lot of fine detail in this wood, and I want to be able to capture that fine detail. It's the equivalent, if you like, of capturing the nuances of white clouds in the sky. If we can capture those and control those highlights and still manage to run PAN F through at 50 ISO and capture the shadows in good detail, then we've really got a winner of a developer on our hands for this particular film. So I'm going to take a meter reading of this fence. And I'm getting a 500th at f4. Now remember, whatever you point your meter at, you're going to get middle grey. The meter thinks everything is zone 5 middle grey. So I need to lift this fence from middle grey, what the meter's telling me, 500 at f4, up into zone 8, where the fence should live. So that's 3 stops, 5, 6, 7, 8, 3 stops. So 500 at f4, 250 at f4, 125 at f4, a 60th at f4. Let's set the camera up and let's take the photograph. I've got f4 and a 60th. Now I'm running this film through at ISO 50. I'll take a second shot. There, we have the photograph. Let's go and develop the film. So to develop this film, I've got myself all prepared here. And what I've got is a bath of water at 20 degrees centigrade. I've got my fixer, which has been warmed up to 20 degrees centigrade. I've got about 400 mils of fixer in there, and it's an alkaline fixer. And in here I have about 450 mils of plain water that's also at 20 degrees centigrade. I have water behind the camera here at 20 centigrade, which I'll be using as the stop bath. And the last thing I do before I start my process is to get the developer ready, because this will start to oxidize as soon as I start my process. So I've got 500 milliliters of water, which is at 20 degrees centigrade, and 2 syringes. And here is the developer that I'm going to use. And this is Pyrocat HD. And the way we're going to develop this film to get the maximum quality from the film is to use Extreme Minimal Agitation with Pyrocat HD. So I've got my HD Part A here and my HD Part B. And there's a previous video on my YouTube channel which shows you how to make these. So the dilution I'm going to use is 2 plus 2 plus 500. So I have 500 already prepared of the water and my 2 syringes. Now I always use separate syringes for the parts A and B. You don't want to get those 2 mixed up. You don't want to contaminate one to the other. So use separate syringes and mark them appropriately. So the first thing I'm going to do is put in my A. Notice I've got gloves on. Very important with any of these pyro developers is to wear gloves. You don't want this stuff on your skin. So I overfill the syringe slightly and I push it back in till I've got 2 mil, and I put it in the water. So there's my first 2 mil of A. Always put the tops on these straight away so there's no accidents. And here's my part B. And again I overfill the syringe and then push it back down till the right amount's there. That's 2 mil. And I put that in. I put that over here. Put the top straight back on. Right. So my developer now needs to be stirred up to mix them all together. 2 plus 2 plus 500. Wash that. Let's check the temperature of this developer. Now whenever you're checking the temperature of your developer, always make sure your thermometer is clean, because it's so easy to contaminate one chemical to the other. The developer is the most important of all the chemicals you're going to use developing the film, so really must be careful with this. So I always give my thermometer a quick rinse, make sure it's clean, and then I'll check the temperature. And that's 20.5 degrees. That's good. Happy with that. I'm going to put this in the water bath to keep stable at 20 degrees. I have my timer ready. I can lose this. This was a bath of hot water I had, which I used to warm up my fixer and my rinse water. So that's not needed anymore. Okay, so to develop the film, the first thing I need to do with extreme minimal agitation is to pre-wet or pre-rinse the film. This will do two things. It allows the film to stabilize at the correct temperature with the tank, which should be 20 degrees or very close to it. And it also expands the emulsion, the gelatin, in the film, so that when we put our very weak developer in, it percolates through the film, or permeates, I should say, through the film nice and steadily and evenly. So for these long developments, I often use a pre-rinse, and certainly in winter when I need to warm up the tank regardless of what developer I'm using. So here's my water at 20 degrees, about 450 ml. Pour it in, and I'm going to pre-rinse that for 2 minutes. Give it a bit of agitation. And nothing's happening except it's warming up the developing tank, and it's causing the gelatin in the emulsion to soak up the water and expand. So let's just, that was a habit, banging it there to get rid of bubbles. Let's leave that there for 2 minutes. Okay, that's our 2 minutes, so I'll stop the timer and we'll pour our water out. Now with medium format, you get a lot of blue dye coming out at this point, but with 35mm you don't have that. Okay, so now we're going to start our development. So here's my developer, all ready to go. Pour it in, start the timer, and I'm going to agitate that for a minute. This makes sure the developer permeates through that emulsion nice and evenly to start our development. Now some of you may have noticed I'm developing a 35mm film here in a 35mm developing tank, and I've just put 500 milliliters of developer into it. Well, that's okay. There's enough room in these tanks to put that much developer in and still have space for a nice agitation regimen. So there is our film beginning to develop. Now I'm going to keep the timer running, and at the 7-minute point I will give it 30 seconds of agitation, and then again at the 14 minutes I will give it 30 seconds of agitation, and then we'll finish the development at 21 minutes. Now, extreme minimal agitation is a phrase coined by Steve Sherman, and he uses different concentrations and different times from me, and that's okay, and I don't want to copy his system anyway, because that's his system and not mine. So I'm giving you the way I do my extreme minimal agitation with Ilford PAN F. So let's wait now until our first agitation again at 7 minutes. So now we're coming up to our 7-minute point, and at 7 minutes I'm going to give the film 30 seconds of gentle but firm agitation. Now we talked earlier about PAN F being an ISO 50 film and having to maintain 50 ISO to help us when we're out shooting. And it's this slow development, this minimal agitation technique, which helps to bring the ISO of the film up and keep it at 50 ISO. Now if I was to develop this film normally, I may only get 32 ISO out of it. But because I'm doing this long, slow development, the shadows can continue to develop very slowly and very slightly, but they will come up to 50 ISO. I've tested it and I know it works. Another great reason for using this long development cycle is the micro contrast. The developer sits and the developer is wasted where it does a lot of development, and it is not wasted away where it's not doing much development. So what happens is, where you've got a boundary between high development and low development, a micro contrast develops between these two boundaries, and that is very good for our sharpness of our film. There's also an increase in acutance. Now, Pyro developers already harden the emulsion, which helps with acutance, which stops the transit of silver across those boundaries that a film developer like D23 would have. So this long development cycle also helps to increase the acutance of the film, and therefore the sharpness is increased. So all in all, the way to develop PAN F to get the maximum quality is to use a system like this. Now I'm using Pyrocat HD here, which in my tests have given me the best possible negative for PAN F+. But I've also tested 510 Pyro, and I found that you can do this exact same technique with 510 Pyro if you dilute it 1 plus 250. So 1 plus 250, and use the same timings as I'm doing now. A 2-minute pre-wash, 1 minute initial agitation, followed by 30 seconds at 7 minutes, 30 seconds at 14 minutes, and finish development at 21 minutes. And you'll get similar results, although I do prefer the Pyrocat HD with this technique. Let's wait till the 14-minute mark for our next agitation. And here we are coming up to our 14-minute mark now. So at 14 minutes, I give the film another 30 seconds of gentle but firm agitation. In between these agitations, it's very important that we don't disturb the film at all. It has to sit absolutely still in that developer for these enhanced acutant effects and micro contrast. So always be very careful, leave it completely alone and walk away and come back. So we're waiting now to the end of the development cycle, which is 21 minutes. Okay, we're coming up to our 21-minute point now. So I'm going to pour out the developer. I'm going to show you what the developer looks like in case you haven't seen one of these Pyro type developers before. But it turns into the color of tea. In fact, 510 Pyro turns even darker than that. So that's the development finished now. I've poured it out, and I'm going to pour in plain water at 20 degrees centigrade. It's important that you keep your temperatures accurate throughout this whole development cycle, and there's a little bit more care to be taken because it's such a long cycle, so your chemistry will slowly cool down, especially if you live in a place where it's cold like here. I'm giving this 30 seconds of agitation. I'll put that up here. And I'm going to do this 3 times in total. So I'm basically washing out the developer with plain water. My personal view is one shouldn't use an acid stop bath. Although I know some people do use a stop bath at half strength for their pyro negatives. But personally, I don't see why you would bother with that if you can do this. The development that's carrying on in there, if any, is so minuscule, it's not going to make the slightest bit of difference to the negatives. So 3 really good rinses with water, like this, agitating continuously to remove the Pyrocat HD. Just before the development ended, I tested all the liquids here to make sure that they were 20 degrees plus or minus half a degree. We don't want to ruin our negatives by putting a change of temperature that shocks the gelatin and creates a mottled effect. This is called reticulation. There we are. Now it's time to fix the film. Nothing's happening in there. It's safe now. You can take your time. Let's get this fixer in. Reset my clock, and I'm going to gently agitate this fixer for 30 seconds. Then I'm going to take a look at the film and see if it has cleared yet. And then I'll fix for twice the length of time it takes the film to clear. So there's my 30 seconds. Let's have a look at the film. And I think you can see there it's clear. There's no lines between the frames. It just looks all shiny black. So it cleared in 30 seconds. So I'll give it a minute to a minute and a half. That's all it needs in the fixer. And it's completely fixed. There's no need to fix any longer than twice the clearing time. There we are. A minute and a half. And now all that's left is for me to wash the film. I'm going to use the Ilford wash technique. And that is to give the film an initial rinse with water. Get the most of the fix off the film. Just put some water in like so. Remember, this is all at 20 centigrade. Don't change the temperature now. Just give it a quick 5 inversions. And that's what I call just rinsing the fix off. And then we'll go into the full Ilford wash, which is fill the tank, 5 inversions, empty. Fill the tank again, 10 inversions, empty. Fill the tank a final time, 20 inversions and empty. And that is your film completely washed. I'll fast forward the video now. Finally, I'm going to just cover the film with water and add a single drop of LFN . Swish the film up and down in it so it mixes all up in that water. You can see it's all slightly bubbly there. And then I'm just going to leave that for 2 minutes before I hang the film up to dry. So here is our negative scanned in, and I think straight away I can see the quality of this negative. It is beautiful. Now remember, we measured this area here with the light meter and we placed it in zone 8. So we're getting some beautiful whites here, but the detail is phenomenal. But also notice here, the shadows are complete. They're not blocked up. They're not completely black. Also at the back here, you can see there's shadows on this side and they are not blocked up either. In the back here, there's some trees and you can see underneath the trees. So we have got basically the perfect negative from Extreme Minimal Agitation in Pyrocat. Let's just look, let's zoom in to see the quality of this negative. Look at that. I told you about this detail that you could see on the wood, and it's perfectly captured. The micro contrast is exceptional. These screws are sharp as a pin. You can even see dust that's on this black plate. And as I move along, I notice this. You can see the brush strokes of the brush that painted this white onto this gate. So that is, I'm speechless, supreme quality. An extremely difficult subject, super high contrast. Look at the sun bouncing off that white paint. And yet the shadows are perfectly placed. Frankly, it's beautiful. Now, of course, that's a scan. This PAN F Plus scans very well. Let's see if it can print on paper. So here's the print. I printed it on fiber-based paper and it just looks stunning. The light is bouncing off that print. It's gorgeous. And the detail, I can't really show you with this iPhone that I film with, but it's all there. It's from the scan. The shadows I've printed a little darker, but there's detail in the shadows. It's gorgeous. So you can get prints like this by matching PAN F with Pyrocat HD. Next week, I want to go into more detail about how we can use the zone system with Extreme Minimal Agitation and PAN F Plus. So I hope you tune in for that. Please give me a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel. There's going to be loads of these videos this year. Don't miss any. Subscribe and hit that bell button so that you'll be informed when one of my videos comes up. Thank you so much, guys, for watching. This is wonderful. And I will see you later this week with another tip. Bye for now.